Hi, everybody. I'm Dakeem, and welcome back to another episode of Casting Directors Say What, where each month I spotlight an amazing casting director in the industry because a lot of what we do as casting directors, guys, is misunderstood. So I hope that this series can shine a light on the wonderful people that are hardworking in this industry that really help bring other people's dreams to life and make them a reality. Now, today we have a very special voiceover guest. She's a good friend of mine. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I am Alexa Magnotto. I am the voiceover casting director at Harbor Picture Company. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. So let's get right into it, right? Tell us, Alexa, how'd you get started in casting?
Oh, I feel like everybody with that question, everybody has such a unique story. And even after watching all of your past videos, I'm obsessed with this question because it's so fascinating.
Isn't
Me,
it?
I hope that my story is a little bit cool too. So I studied music theater at Elon University in North Carolina, and we didn't do that big, we didn't have one of those big showcases, right? That like you would come up to New York and do, and you meet all the casting directors and agents and stuff. We would bring everybody down to us. So a part of that, my job was to pick everybody up from the airport and bring them back and forth. So I got to spend some time with casting directors. And I was like, cool, let me just like pick your brain in a non-weird way. And I ended up landing an internship at Telsey and Company with one of the casting directors that ended up coming down because it was my senior year. I knew that I was moving to New York, and I thought, I think that this would be an interesting path. I've always been fascinated with casting. Let me see how these two worlds like blend together, right? So I did a summer at Telsey, and then it just kind of like catapulted from there. I did a whole bunch of freelancing gigs. I worked at a talent agency, which that got me into voiceover, which I never thought that I would ever get into.
Wow.
So yeah, it's just kind of like taking those opportunities and really putting your best foot forward. You never quite know where you're going to land, and that's okay. You just have to stay on your path and be confident and love what you do. So that's how I got into casting.
That's fascinating because, like you said, everybody's story about how they get into casting is so unique because it's such a
Mhm.
odd job when you try to explain it to people. But with
Yeah.
voiceovers too, like what about voiceovers? How did you like get bit by that and then was like, you know what? Hey, everybody.
Yeah. So I was hooked up through a friend because I was in between gigs and I wanted more of like a full-time situation because rent was expensive. So a friend of mine had hooked me up with another friend of his at this talent agency, and we had the Telsey connection. She was an intern, I think, after I was. Um, she was a talent agent in the theatrical kids department. So I met up with her and her boss because they were looking for an assistant. I told them my background and what I do, and I thought, okay, I love kids, no theater, so this would be a seamless transition. Um, I ended up having like the greatest interview with her. It was fantastic. And I'm walking out and I'm like, heck yeah, I got this job. This is going to be fabulous. And I get on the elevator and I'm going down. And this other girl gets in the elevator with me and she's looking at me and she's like, huh, so I heard you just had an interview with so-and-so. Like, how did it go? I was like, I think it went really well. I would really love to work here. I had no idea who she was. Get off the elevator and we were like, okay, bye, went separate ways. And then later on that evening, I got a phone call from the head of the voiceover department at this talent agency. And this woman was like, hi, Alexa. I heard you rode the elevator down with my assistant and that you had just applied for a job here. I know that the position for what you had originally, I was going to say audition for, what you had originally applied for isn't available, but my assistant just put in her 2 weeks and she told me to contact you. And I was like, that's really weird. Okay. So we ended up talking for 2 hours. I said I knew nothing about voiceover, that I was the wrong candidate for her.
Mhm.
And then she ended up talking me into it. She was like, I will teach you everything you need to know. And then I was her assistant, and it was it was the hardest thing I had ever done, but also the greatest thing I had ever done, because that laid the foundation for me for everything that I do. now and what I will do later, even like casting on my side. So that's how I got into the whole voiceover world. I never thought in a million years I would be casting voiceover, to be honest. But again, it was just networking, and I was on the casting side theatrically. And then this opportunity had opened up with another casting director who was doing commercial voiceover. So then I hopped over to her place. And then she also taught me everything on the casting side that I needed to know. So between that and the working at the talent agency, it was just kind of like a seamless thing that was brewing up that helped me do what I do now.
And that's a great point that you brought up. That story is important, I think, because I always tell people you never know who you're getting on the elevator with. So
Exactly.
watch yourself. The minute you walk into that building, that's
Yeah.
when the professional hat comes on, because you never know. Now,
Yeah.
so we talked about why you got into casting, why you love it so much, right? It's very fulfilling. And I understand that goal of being scared to death and then
Mhm.
challenging yourself and then
Mhm.
accomplishing it and feeling even more empowered. That's how I was with voiceovers. When I first sat down and was being tutored in how to direct somebody in voiceovers, terrified. I was like, I know how to do it when this their whole body, but oh my God, how am I going to tell them with just their voice? But you figure it out, Now,
Yep.
let
And
me ask you another question, okay? Things have changed so much since the pandemic and everything. What is your perspective on the current state of the voiceover industry right now? What do you think actors should know, whether they're entering it or have been doing it for a while? Maybe they stepped away and they're like, is it the same as what it used to be? What's your
mm,
perspective?
the $1 million question, right? I think voiceover has definitely changed, right, over the past few years. Um, and when I have been asked this question, I would say make sure you have a great at-home setup because everything is remote. This is what we're doing. Um, but to be honest, now that we're kind of back into our offices and we have our equipment, we have beautiful booths that aren't really being used all the time. That's one of the things that I have been pitching to my clients by saying, hey, not only do we have this, but you can also come back in and you can be in person with the talent. Because that is one thing that, yes, we did get used to it. But more so than not, I'm finding that clients are really liking that. Because yeah, it's easy to do everything at home and remote, but there's something about physically being in a room with someone, in directing them in an actual session that I think is so important. So I think that's the one thing that has changed a lot. If that answered your question,
No,
sorry.
yeah, it did. And I love that you brought up the fact of being in person with voiceovers. Because it is easy to just do a voiceover at home. But I
Yeah.
did many voiceovers in person, and it's that interaction is so great. We just got to find some studios for us to start to come into.
Yeah. So the other thing that I was going to mention too is that and I'm sure you're finding this as well, and correct me if you're not, but it's hard trusting people that they say that they have an at-home setup and anybody can do this, right? I mean, especially since the pandemic, everybody's gotten into voiceover, which is great. Heck yeah, let's do it. But just because you have a microphone and you have a voice doesn't mean that you're a voice actor, right? So to me, it's what work have you put in to be a voice actor, right? What classes have you taken? Who have you taken classes from? What kind of network are you building? That sort of thing. Because the way that I explain this to talent is, yes, if you have a microphone and you're doing it and you're trying to break into the industry, that's one facet of it. But being a casting director in this world, I need to make sure that not only you know how to do that part, but when you get to the client and I'm not in the room and I'm not directing you, that you're going to be able to hold yourself at a professional stance, that I'm not going to have to worry about you, or a client's going to reach back out to me and be like, hey, like, their audition was really great, but I'm having a really hard time directing them. Have you worked with them before? All of this stuff that kind of piles up onto it. And
Mhm.
then on the flip side of that, the engineers who I work with, sometimes I will get, I'll get like an angry message from them saying, not angry because everybody's awesome, but like I'll get a message from them saying, hey, so-and-so setup, it's not great. I'm like, what now? So like even if people say that they have like a professional at-home setup, like what are those qualities? I
Right,
just don't have to worry about that so much anymore when we have studios, we have
right,
places that actors don't have to worry about making sure that their gain is on correctly, or they have the right interface or the right microphone. In the beginning of the pandemic, yeah, that was super, super important. And everybody really pulled through and it was awesome.
yeah,
But now, because there are so many people that are in the industry now, it's a game of telephone, right? And nobody like really knows what to do. So I would rather take that equation out for them and just say, let's have you record in the studio. So all you have to focus on is your talent and what you are doing.
right. And give that control back to the casting directors when, like we had before, you know? Now,
That too. Yeah.
well, here's a good question just about what we do. What's one misunderstanding about what you do that drives you a little cuckoo crazy
Mm,
as a casting director?
I would say, I would say that people think our job is easy, or that people like fully don't understand what our job is,
Right?
right?
How stressful it can be sometimes.
And how
Find a
stressful it
blind
can be.
juggling person for me, Dakeem. Oh my God, help me.
But we are a part of the puzzle. We are just a piece of the puzzle, right? So just because, I mean, you're amazing, so I'm sure you'd be able to find that person, and it would take some digging, but you'd be able to do it because you have the resources, and you know who to contact and like the red flags to look out for. Um, yeah, I think, it's interesting because I think about this question and how I would answer it to like my great aunt or my cousin that literally has no idea what I do. And the last time that I saw them, they were like, huh, weren't you a singer? And then I'm like, not anymore. Uh, like casting, what does that mean?
Right. Like I tell
Um,
people that all the time. And they're like, what is that? I'm just like, shut
yeah.
up. I'm sorry, I'm a human resource person for television. Okay.
And bringing together a plethora of like really good talent to present to my client so my client can look good and my client can present their people to their client, right? So it's and there's a lot more, there's a lot of steps included that like a lot of the talent don't see,
Yeah.
right? So like the negotiations, the going to bat for them, um, building those boundaries with clients. Like if I have a new client and they're used to not using a casting director, um, it's just having a conversation, right? And it's building those boundaries of saying, okay, so if this is a union gig, here are the steps you're going to need to follow to make sure you're within like the union standards.
Right.
If you're going the non-union route, here are my standards that we work, that all of the talent that I work with know that I'm going to work on. So there's it's not just like building a breakdown, sending it out and picking talent,
Right.
right? Like every single time that I send a breakdown out, I am constantly listening to people. And and this is the one thing that I kind of miss about in-person auditions. I had such a nice rapport with a ton of different talent that would
Yeah.
constantly be coming through the door. So it's not that I wouldn't want to be their best friends when I'm asking them like, hey, how was your weekend? Or, hey, how's your kid doing? Because it was sweet and I got to know them on a personal level. But on the flip side of that, I'm trying to gauge who they are as a human being, right?
Yeah.
They're all like first dates.
Yeah.
I'm making sure that not only can you do your job, but you're also like a genuinely nice person.
Right.
So that's one thing that I do miss with it, because when I go and listen to people's reels, or if I'm casting something and an agent pitches this new client to me and I don't really know much about them, I can't ask them how their weekend was,
Right.
all
You
all
know, It's
just
no
what we want.
chit chat time because we got to get like to work and stuff, you know? And that
Exactly.
in-person
Yeah.
connection is so important. Now, let me
Yeah.
ask you this. What do you think as a voiceover casting director, what do you think like new actors should be doing to get started in the industry? And what should they realistically understand about deciding to make this a career? Because you mentioned like some people wake up and they're like, I have a good voice, I should be a voiceover artist. And it's not really that simple. And some people
Yeah.
like, I want to do this, but I don't know how to break into the industry.
Mhm.
What's your advice for people just getting started? Like, we'll start here. You have to do A, B, and C.
Yeah. Um, not to sound biased, but I would say to try to get in with every single casting director that you can find. Like, do research first, right? And
Mhm.
make sure financially this is something you want to do. I think a huge misconception is that people think that this could either be a good gig for like side money, which I don't believe in. I'm sure that there are people out there that have been able to do that, and they could disagree with me, and that is a-okay. But I fully believe that, voiceover is a full-time gig. Um, and you have to constantly be working on your craft for it.
Yeah.
So with that being said, I would start taking classes, right? Because you have to understand your tool. You have to know what type of tool you have for what you can submit yourself on. You can't do everything, right?
Right.
You have to start somewhere. So figuring out if that is commercials or animation or audiobooks, right? Figure out which one you want to do and really, really learn that one first. And then once you get good at that one, you can kind of spread out and educate yourself on all of the other types of voiceovers. But I say to study with casting directors because from what I've found, and even from how I started, even everything in my class, I would go take class from other casting directors because I
Mhm.
was like, cool, what's your technique? How are you seeing this versus anybody else that's teaching this? And also, casting directors are the ones that are kind of like doing it with the client in real time. So every bit of information that you are going to get is going to be valuable. And everybody's going to have their own way of doing it.
Yeah,
That's also another thing too.
that's
So
what's
figuring out like,
important.
yes. So figuring out your style and who you are and what you like, it's easy to do, but you have to put in the work for it.
Yep, yep. I love it. Alexa, tell everybody how they can reach out to you and if you'd like to be contacted.
Oh, okay. So this is also another thing too. People are gonna hate me. I used to be very big on LinkedIn, and I still am. But it has turned into one of those things where everybody is reaching out to me, right? And so we were talking a little bit beforehand about relationships with people, right? I probably have like 300 people in my LinkedIn purgatory right now because I don't know them. And it's hard for me to want to like have a connection and a relationship with someone when they just randomly reach out and send a cold
Mhm.
email. Um, and it's also, and it's really funny because it's like, hey, I would love to pick your brain. Do you have 5 minutes or can I take you out for coffee? And I'm like,
Wow.
I would love that, but I can't because if I do that for everybody, then I'm not going to have time for my own job, and then I'll
Right.
get fired and then it'll be bad and all of that. So as for contacting, I'm not quite there yet. If
No,
you
that's
have,
fine. That's
yeah,
good. I
that's
want you to
okay to
be
say.
honest. Like, I don't want people to contact me. This is another example of how you got to do your research about casting directors so you know how to approach them. You're
Yeah.
a unique, you're not a unique example, but this is an example. I appreciate this. Say it.
No, thanks.
Say, don't bother me.
No, and I don't know. I don't want it to seem like don't bother me. In the beginning of the pandemic, anybody that wanted to connect with me, I was like, yes, 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 yes. And then I go on LinkedIn and I go through my feed and I'm like, I don't know these people. And it's hard for my brain because I can't, it's too much, right? And then everybody's pushing what they do. And I can't get to know them on a personal level,
Yeah.
right? So if you have an agent, and you know, you're watching this amazing video and you say, hey, I want to connect with Alexa, go through your agent to see if they have like any sort of networking connection through me, and that they can vouch for you.
Right.
Again, I don't want to sound like I'm unapproachable, because I love my job and my job is
Just have a
to
certain
be
way
with
you
talent.
like to be approached. And that's
Exactly.
good because we're all individuals. We're all like that, you know?
It burned me out, Tekim. I'm not gonna lie, it burned me out. And I tried like responding to every single person. If they sent me a direct message on LinkedIn, I said, okay, great, this is awesome. Like, let's do this. And then I realized I can't do it for everybody. So I had to figure out kind of like a healthy way to take a step back while also still like meeting new talent, learning new talent. So I try to teach as much as possible.
Oh,
Um, and that's how I get
what
to
do you
know and meet a
teach?
lot of people. I teach at Actors Connection
That's a good way to
and a
find
couple
out
other stuff.
about you. I
Yeah.
also tell people, I'm like, use LinkedIn as a research tool to find out who's a casting director. Use that as research. And then again, find another way to sort of reach out to them, not with an
Right.
ask, just like maybe with an introduction or like, oh, you cast this. I really liked it. Have a good day. Leave it at that.
Yeah.
I always tell
Yeah.
actors when you're first reaching out to somebody, don't have your hand out because I don't know you and everybody has their hands out. There's so many hands, you know?
And there's a lot of like people are wearing a lot of different hats these days. So it's like, you know, I'm a casting director and I'm only a casting director. Like I'm not a voice actor. I don't do other facets of this. Like this is my lane. This is what I'm doing. So I am still trying to figure out other ways of, you know, meeting new people or talk. Like I do panels a lot. I'll go to different places and talk about voiceover. I love to be approachable. I hope it's not coming across as like, don't contact Alexa, because I
No.
love people. But I also have like a private Instagram and like all this other stuff, because when it was public, I get random people messaging me about my nephews. And I'm like, what is
Oh
happening right now?
no,
And I
right?
know it's all good intent, but it's a little much. So especially because
So
everybody is trying to do this right now.
so everybody should follow and make sure they look out on Actors Connection because that's where they'll find you, right? And if you
Yeah,
I always tell people too, it's best when you're taking classes to make sure that you take a class that has an industry professional at the end of it that you can meet, because that's an easy way to network, you know?
exactly. Exactly. Or if there's a connection with somebody, right? Have that person introduce you on
Yeah.
behalf of, you know, like it's that sort of thing rather than, hey, here's me, here's my stuff, because then there's no connection.
Yeah. Alexa, thank you so much for this. It was so amazing talking to you.
Thank you for
I
having
hope
me.
that everybody found this very informative. And you, again, this is an example of the uniqueness of us all in the casting industry, guys, you know? So thank you so much, guys. We'll see you next month for another episode of Casting Directors Say What, where we're having another amazing guest. So everybody have a great weekend. And thanks, Alexa. Look out for her at Actors Connection and make sure you're on your radar because she's amazing.